They say every suburban dream hides a nightmare behind its white picket fence. Willowbrook Estates looked like the cover of a real estate brochure. Identical beige houses lined up like obedient soldiers, lawns trimmed with military precision, and sprinklers whispering on perfect schedules. But the air smelled fake, like fertilizer and false friendliness. The kind of place where people smile while checking your trash bins for rule violations. When I inherited my grandmother's house here, I thought I'd won the lottery. After 15 years in uniform, it felt good to come home to something solid. Grandma Rosa raised me after my parents died when I was 12, and her house was more than property. It was memory wrapped in stucco. The creak of the floorboards, the cinnamon vanilla scent that clung to every curtain. It was safety. She used to tell me, "Mijo, stand up to bullies, but do it the right way." I didn't know that lesson would become my battle plan. At that point, my life finally felt balanced. I was serving as an Army Reserve MP, just accepted into a federal drug interdiction task force. My Jeep, government-issued, armored, and marked with small law enforcement insignia, was my pride. It wasn't pretty, but it had saved lives. When I parked it in Grandma's driveway before deployment, I thought I was respecting the woman who taught me integrity. Turns out, I was baiting the most dangerous predator in suburbia, an HOA Karen with too much power and zero restraint. Enter Bethany Kensington Wright, 52, real estate agent, pearl earrings, and the confidence of someone who's never been told no. She drove a spotless white Lexus and ran Willowbrook's Homeowners Association like a personal kingdom. Residents called her Madam President. Half as a joke, half out of fear. Her husband, Carl, sat on city council, which made her believe she was untouchable. She measured grass height with an actual ruler, and once fined a neighbor for using non-neutral mulch. Our first meeting was through an email. Subject line, "Community Standards Violation." I was reading it in a desert tent overseas when the absurdity hit me. She'd cited me for unauthorized commercial vehicle storage. My government Jeep, clearly labeled federal property, was apparently an eyesore. The fine started at $50 per day. I laughed at first, thinking it was a clerical error. Then the second notice came, with threats of legal action and a deadline stamped in red. Maya, my younger sister, offered to handle it. She's a middle school teacher, gentle heart, steady voice, the kind of person who still believes people mean well. She drove over to the HOA office, armed with my deployment papers and Grandma's death certificate, thinking a little humanity would fix everything. But humanity doesn't exist in Bethany's vocabulary. Maya later told me how Bethany never even looked up from her clipboard. "Rules are rules," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "If your brother can't comply, perhaps this neighborhood isn't right for your family." That sentence hit harder than any mortar blast I'd ever heard. My sister came home in tears, humiliated in front of a room full of neighbors who pretended not to hear. That night she called me overseas. The satellite connection crackled, but I could still hear the fear in her voice. "Tank," she said, "she'll put a lien on the house. She knows people on the school board. If I complain, she can make trouble at work." I felt a coldness I hadn't felt since combat, the kind that makes your heart beat slow and your mind sharpen. Standing under desert stars, I stared at my phone and thought about Grandma's words. Stand up to bullies, but do it the right way. I wasn't going to lose our home to a suburban dictator with a clipboard. I wasn't there yet. But the war had already begun. What Bethany didn't know was that the ugly Jeep she wanted gone was worth more than her Lexus, and protected by laws that would make her suburban rulebook look like a joke. She was about to learn the difference between HOA authority and federal jurisdiction. Deployment changes your definition of danger. You start thinking you can handle anything. Bullets, sandstorms, cartel raids. What I wasn't ready for was watching my little sister cry from 8,000 miles away because of a woman with a clipboard and a superiority complex. Maya did everything right. She emailed Bethany proof of my deployment, attached federal orders, even offered to cover the Jeep with a tarp. But every message got the same robotic reply. Violations remain unresolved. Fines will continue to accrue. When Maya called me that night, her voice trembled. Tank, she's doubling the fine every week. She says if we don't move the Jeep, she'll tow it and add legal fees. The desert air around me was still, but I felt heat rising behind my eyes. Out there, we risked our lives to stop smugglers from poisoning American streets. Back home, some HOA dictator was threatening my family for following the rules too well. I told Maya to stay calm, to document everything, to never confront her alone. But Bethany wasn't done. 2 days later, another email arrived, this time demanding immediate compliance to preserve neighborhood property values. She copied half the HOA board and even mentioned my military vehicle as a potential community safety concern. That line made my blood run cold, because I knew exactly what that meant. She was labeling my Jeep, federal law enforcement property, as dangerous. That's how people justify discrimination. Wrap it in legal words, call it safety, and watch everyone nod along. Maya tried one last time to reason with her face-to-face. She told me later how Bethany stood on Grandma's porch with that fake smile plastered on her lips. I appreciate your brother's
service, Bethany said sweetly, but community rules apply to everyone. We can't make exceptions, or we'd have chaos. Chaos. That word echoed in Maya's head as Bethany handed her another notice like she was passing a death sentence. Within a week, fines totaled over $1,000. Maya found envelopes taped to our door at sunrise. Her name spelled wrong, but the threat written loud and clear. Failure to comply will result in property lien and legal action. When she called me again, I could hear her fighting back tears. Tank, she said she'll call the school district if I keep questioning her. She told me people who support me might regret it. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about control. Bethany wasn't enforcing policy. She was flexing power. And she'd found the perfect target. A deployed soldier who couldn't fight back, and a school teacher too kind to fight dirty. I started doing what I do best, research. During breaks between patrols, I read the Service Members Civil Relief Act, a federal law designed to protect deployed personnel from exactly this kind of harassment. Turns out, threatening fines or legal action against an active duty service member's property isn't just unethical, it's a federal offense. So I called in a favor. Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams, a JAG lawyer I'd trained with, picked up on the first ring. Williams, I said, how illegal is it for an HOA to threaten my sister while I'm deployed overseas? Her laugh was short, cold, and lethal. Rodriguez, that woman just stepped into federal territory. Send me everything. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of control returning. I forwarded every document Maya sent me. Photos of violation letters, timestamps, and Bethany's smug emails. Williams replied 2 hours later, under review. Don't engage directly. Let her hang herself. Back in Willowbrook, the psychological warfare continued. Maya said Bethany had started driving by the house slowly, like a shark circling prey. Neighbors began whispering. One woman stopped waving to Maya entirely. Another told her she should keep a lower profile until things blew over. That's how fear spreads, quietly, like mold. I told Maya to install security cameras to record every encounter. She didn't like the idea at first. Tank, it feels paranoid. But paranoia is just awareness with a bad reputation. That night, as I sat under the humming generators of our forward base, I made a promise to Grandma's memory. They're not taking our house. Not 1 inch of it. Bethany thought she was finding a helpless soldier. What she didn't realize was that my Jeep wasn't just my vehicle, it was federal law enforcement property tied to an active task force investigation. The moment she touched it, her HOA drama would become a federal case file. And judging by the way her arrogance was escalating, that moment was coming sooner than she could imagine. It started with a stack of old papers and a gut, feeling that something didn't add up, while Bethany was busy parading around the neighborhood acting like a suburban dictator. Maya was quietly digging through Grandma's dusty filing cabinet. That old cabinet had been sitting in the corner of her sewing room for decades, smelling like paper, lavender, and history. Inside, tucked between property tax receipts and faded family photos, was a folder labeled Willowbrook HOA, 1987. That's when Maya found the truth. The original HOA bylaws were short, typed on yellowing paper and signed by the community's founding members, people who'd built the neighborhood for veterans returning home. And right there, under Section 4B, was a line that changed everything. Government vehicles, including military, law enforcement, and emergency services, are exempt from all parking and property storage restrictions. Maya reread it 3 times. Bethany's so-called violations weren't just petty, they were completely fabricated. She scanned the document, highlighted that clause, and compared it to the updated rules Bethany had emailed everyone last year. Whole paragraphs were missing, rewritten in corporate legal jargon that no resident had ever voted on. In Bethany's version, military vehicles had been reclassified as commercial and non-residential assets. That's not a typo. That's fraud. Maya's hands shook as she realized what was happening. Bethany wasn't enforcing the rules, she was rewriting them. And no one had questioned it because she made herself look official. Letterhead, legal words, confident tone. That night, Maya called me. Her voice was steady but burning. Tank, she made up the violations. I found Grandma's original HOA papers. Military vehicles are protected. It's all a lie. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Send me everything, I said. When the files came through, I forwarded them straight to Staff Sergeant Williams. Her reply was instant. Rodriguez, she's committing federal fraud if she falsified governance documents affecting protected service members. Keep collecting evidence. The next morning, Maya drove to the county records office to verify the originals. The clerk, a quiet man with tired eyes, pulled up the official HOA charter on his screen. These are the only registered bylaws, he said, pointing to the same veteran-friendly section. What she's circulating isn't recorded. That's illegal. Meanwhile, Bethany kept escalating. She sent a final notice, bold red header threatening legal counsel, and a demand for immediate removal of the non-compliant vehicle. The letter ended with her signature, Bethany K. Wright, President Willowbrook HOA. Maya stood in Grandma's kitchen, reading it out loud while the clock ticked like a time bomb. She's bluffing, I said. Maya exhaled, shaky but determined. Then let's call her bluff. She started talking to neighbors, quietly, cautiously. Turns out, we weren't the only ones targeted. The Johnsons, a Marine family down the street, got fined for excessive noise because of their motorcycle. The Washingtons, Navy family, cited for improper flag display. Sarah Martinez, whose husband was deployed, fined for having unprofessional garden decor. Different violations, same signature. Bethany K. Wright. Maya's teacher instincts kicked in. She created a spreadsheet, dates, names, violation types, and amounts. Patterns started to emerge. Every targeted household had something in common: military affiliation. Bethany wasn't running a community. She was running a discrimination campaign. That night, Maya called again. Her tone had changed. No more fear, just quiet fury. She's been at this for years, Tank. Every military family that moves in eventually leaves. And guess who buys their homes cheap? Carl Wright's real estate company. There it was, the motive. Grandma's house wasn't just sentimental, it was valuable. And Bethany's power trip was part of a bigger plan to drive out anyone who didn't fit her picture-perfect neighborhood vision. Keep digging, I told Maya. Document everything. I'll handle the rest. She didn't know what the rest meant, but I did. In my world, we call that building a case. I started pulling satellite pings, digital copies, timestamps, anything connecting Bethany's false documents to interstate communication. Because once it crosses state lines, it's not local anymore. It's federal. Bethany thought she was fighting a soldier with a truck. In reality, she just picked a fight with the United States government, and she had no idea the evidence she'd created was already enough to bury her in court. All we needed now was for her to make one more mistake, one final act of arrogance. That would turn HOA drama into a federal felony, and believe me, she was just arrogant enough to do it. The first rule of an investigation: never let your target know she's already under surveillance. Bethany thought she was running the neighborhood. What she didn't know was that every one of her moves was now being documented by military-grade technology. When I left for deployment, I'd parked my Jeep in Grandma's driveway, locked it with a reinforced chain, and activated the task force's onboard security system. Federal vehicles aren't just transport, they're evidence vaults on wheels. Motion sensors, GPS tracking, internal cameras, encrypted data, all designed to capture anyone who touches them. So when Maya called one morning whispering, "Tank, she's outside again," I told her to leave the blinds closed and let the Jeep do the watching. Bethany wasn't subtle. She strutted up the driveway in designer sunglasses, clipboard in one hand, phone camera in the other. The sound of her heels clicking against concrete was almost rhythmic, like a countdown. She circled the Jeep, crouched, and snapped photos from every angle. Then she leaned closer to the driver's side window, pressing her face against the glass like she was peering into a crime scene. The motion sensors triggered silently. Every movement, every photo, every second of her trespassing was being recorded in crisp HD. Maya stayed hidden inside the house, heart pounding. "She's taking pictures of the dashboard now," she whispered through the phone. "Perfect," I said. "Let her collect evidence for us." Later that night, I downloaded the footage remotely. The data feed was beautiful. Timestamps, infrared captures, GPS pings, all showing Bethany entering our property 17 times in 3 days. She wasn't enforcing community standards anymore. She was stalking federal property. I sent the logs straight to Captain Sarah Chen, my task force supervisor. Her response came in one sentence. "Rodriguez, how fast do you want me to make this woman's life complicated?" We decided to wait. Because sometimes the best way to destroy a criminal is to let them think they're winning. Bethany's next move was psychological warfare. She hired a private security company, Exec Safe Patrol, to monitor community compliance. 2 guards in a white SUV started driving slow laps around Grandma's block every hour. Their tinted windows reflected the morning sun like silent threats. Maya tried to ignore them, but they escalated fast. One afternoon, as she carried groceries from her car, one of the guards, big guy, buzz cut, mirrored shades, approached her. "Ma'am," he said, blocking her path, "we've had complaints about your brother's vehicle posing a community safety risk. Military-grade hardware doesn't belong in residential zones." Maya froze. "That's a federal law enforcement vehicle. My brother's deployed." He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Military families can be unpredictable. We just want to keep the neighborhood safe." Maya, bless her teacher instincts, started recording on her phone. "Are you saying my brother is a threat because he's in the military?" The guard stepped closer, trying to intimidate her. "Ma'am, just saying." some soldiers bring their work home. That was his mistake, because in that moment, Maya got the one thing we needed: verbal evidence of discrimination and harassment. She sent me the recording that night. I forwarded it to Captain Chen, who passed it directly to the Federal Licensing Bureau. Within 24 hours, ExecSafe Patrol's license was suspended, pending federal investigation for unauthorized surveillance of government property. Bethany must have panicked when her hired muscle vanished overnight, because her emails suddenly turned frantic. Unregistered vehicles threaten community safety. Residents are concerned about federal markings. She sent copies to the police, the city council, and even animal control. Every message was time-stamped, every lie documented. But that wasn't the worst. She started spreading rumors that my Jeep contained weapons and classified material that could endanger local residents. Parents at Maya's school started whispering that she was harboring something dangerous. Her principal called her in for a concern me. When Maya told me that over the phone, I could hear chalk dust in her voice. The sound teachers make when they're trying not to cry. They're saying I shouldn't be teaching kids if my family's connected to military surveillance. That was the moment my protective instincts crossed a line from anger to strategy. Maya, I said, it's time to flip the script. We started building a digital case file. Every violation notice, every rumor, every trespassing photo. Maya had learned fast. She was no longer the frightened teacher. She was a data-collecting machine, labeling evidence like she graded essays, and the best part? Bethany's arrogance made her sloppy. Every fake rule she wrote, every intimidation letter she signed, every call she made to city officials, it was all leaving a trail that led straight back to her and her husband's real estate empire. Captain Chen called me again 2 days later. Rodriguez, your HOA president, is digging her own grave. But if she touches that Jeep again, she won't just be facing fines. She'll be facing federal felony charges. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Then let's make sure she gets her chance. The trap was set. The cameras were rolling, and the next time Bethany Kensington Wright crossed my property line, she wouldn't just be violating HOA bylaws, she'd be committing a national security breach. She had no idea the suburban game she thought she controlled was about to become a federal takedown. Morning in Willowbrook usually smells like coffee and freshly watered lawns. On that Tuesday, the air tasted like static, thick with the kind of tension you can feel before thunder hits. Maya was already up grading papers at the kitchen table when she heard the low growl of a diesel engine outside. She glanced through the blinds and froze. A tow truck idled at the curb, and standing in our driveway, still wearing her satin bathrobe and heels, was Bethany Kensington Wright, bolt cutters in hand. Clang. The sound ripped through the neighborhood like a gunshot. The first bite of metal snapping my chain echoed off garage doors up and down the street. Maya's hands shook as she fumbled for her phone. Tank, she's here! She's cutting your lock right now! 8,000 miles away, in a tent lit by pale desert dawn, my satellite phone buzzed against my cot. I answered half asleep, then sat upright so fast I hit my head on the canvas roof. Say that again. She's stealing your Jeep. Maya's voice cracked. She's got a tow truck, no paperwork. She's screaming something about community standards. Outside her window, Bethany barked orders like a general on parade. Hook it up! It's an unauthorized vehicle. I have full HOA authority. The tow driver, a big guy in a grease-stained cap, hesitated when he saw the federal decals on the Jeep. Lady, this thing's government property. It's abandoned, she shouted. Now move it before I find you too. He took one step closer, read the words, Federal Task Force, stenciled on the side, and went pale. Nope, not touching that. Not for any amount. He dropped the chain and backed away fast enough to leave tire marks. Bethany's face twisted. Coward, I'll do it myself. She jammed the bolt cutters into the chain again. The moment the final link snapped, my Jeep woke up. Hidden sensors triggered a silent cascade. GPS pinged to Homeland Security, dash cameras activating, internal systems recording every frame. Within 90 seconds, My phone buzzed with an encrypted alert. Unauthorized access. Federal property. Maya, keep filming, I said. My hands shook, but my voice didn't. Whatever happens, don't step outside. Through her trembling camera lens, Bethany wrestled with the chain, sweat streaking her mascara, hair sticking to her forehead. She was screaming about property values while trespassing on federal evidence. The absurdity would have been funny if it hadn't been criminal. 2 blocks away, Mrs. Patterson peeked through her curtains. When she saw Bethany hacking at government property, she gasped loud enough for half the street to hear. The widow of 2 military sons, she'd lived under Bethany's rule for years, too afraid to speak. Not anymore. She grabbed her phone and started calling every veteran in Willowbrook. Within minutes, the quiet suburb erupted. Doors opened. Flags came out. Tom Henderson, the old Vietnam vet from Lot 12, marched down the street in his worn field jacket. "You're not touching that boy's vehicle," he barked, stepping between the Jeep and Bethany. "You want it? You go through 30 American veterans first." Bethany spun on him, breathless. "This is private property." "You're trespassing!" Tom just folded his arms. "So are you, ma'am." By 9 a.m., a human wall of neighbors stood shoulder to shoulder around the driveway. Old soldiers, teachers, young parents who'd finally had enough. Maya's camera caught everything. Bethany pacing, waving papers, shrieking about law and order, while real order closed in on her. Then came the sirens. The federal alert had done its job. From my end of the world, I tracked the pings as they moved. Base Command, Homeland Security, local field office, U.S. Marshals. 23 minutes after the lock broke, a pair of black SUVs turned into Willowbrook Estates with lights flashing. Bethany panicked. She ran to the community gate and locked it, actually changed the padlock, blocking federal vehicles outside. "They can't enter without HOA permission," she screamed. Her voice echoed through Maya's phone like a banshee's wail. Inside the SUVs, the marshals killed their sirens, but not their cameras. Every second of Bethany's meltdown was being recorded from 3 angles. "Maya," I said through gritted teeth. She just added obstruction of federal justice to her resume. Neighbors started chanting, low at first, then louder. "Let them in! Let them in!" The chant rolled across the cul-de-sac until even the birds stopped singing. Bethany turned, realized every eye in Willowbrook was on her, and for a split second the power drained from her face. But arrogance dies hard. "This is a private community," she shouted at the marshals through the gate. "You have no jurisdiction here." The lead marshal, Jennifer Torres, stepped forward, badge glinting in the sun. "Ma'am," she said, voice calm but edged with steel, "you are currently impeding a federal investigation and unlawfully detaining government property. Open the gate. Now!" Bethany's response was a shaky laugh. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president." Torres lifted her radio. "Copy that," she said. "Suspect is detaining federal assets. Initiating breach protocol." Click. The sound of that radio transmission was the moment Bethany's kingdom crumbled. Maya's phone shook as she tried to hold it steady. On screen, federal agents cut through Bethany's new padlock in one clean motion, the same sound Bethany had made hours earlier when she thought she was in control. Clang. Poetic justice in surround sound. Agents flooded in, surrounding the Jeep. One handed Bethany a piece of paper. Warrant for seizure, signed and stamped. She read it, mouth opening and closing like a fish. From 8,000 miles away, I watched the live stream feed from the Jeep's camera. The image froze on her stunned face, mid-scream, as blue lights painted her white Lexus in flashes of judgment. Grandma's words drifted through my mind. "Stand up to bullies. Mijo, but do it the right way." That morning, justice had started with the snap of a chain, and before the sun set, the woman who ruled our neighborhood by fear would learn that the only rule that matters is the law. The morning Bethany cut that lock didn't just wake up the neighborhood, it woke up the entire federal chain of command. By the time I'd finished my debrief overseas, Willowbrook Estates was no longer a sleepy subdivision. It was an active crime scene. The marshals secured the Jeep, sealed off the street, and documented everything. Bethany stood there shaking, still clutching her clipboard like it could stop a badge. "This is harassment!" she screamed as agents photographed the broken chain. One marshal didn't even look up. "Ma'am, that's evidence of a federal felony. News travels fast in suburbs." By noon, every porch camera in the community had footage uploaded to social media. The caption under one viral clip read, "HOA Karen versus federal agents. You won't believe who wins." The views climbed faster than her lawyer's blood pressure. While Bethany tried to spin the story, Maya was in Grandma's kitchen turning chaos into documentation. Her laptop glowed amid piles of papers. She'd started a timeline, every violation, every email, every threat. When the marshals knocked on the door, she didn't panic. She handed them a flash drive. "Everything you need's in here," she said. For a second, the lead agent just blinked. "Ma'am, this is more organized than most of our case files." That night, my secure inbox flooded with reports. The Jeep's internal cameras had captured Bethany trespassing, attempting to open doors, even instructing the tow driver. Homeland Security flagged it as theft of classified federal property with potential espionage indicators. It wasn't about parking anymore. It was about national security. Bethany still didn't understand the magnitude. She called a neighborhood meeting to clear up misconceptions. Only half the residents showed, and half of them filmed her. "They overreacted," she insisted. "That vehicle was abandoned." Someone shouted from the back, "You cut the lock!" Laughter rippled. The empire of fear was cracking. Meanwhile, Maya's digging uncovered something darker. Buried inside HOA emails were invoices for consulting projects paid to Kensington Urban Holdings, Carl Wright's development company. $184,000 in community funds siphoned over 3 years. The so-called landscaping upgrades, playground repairs, and streetlight improvements? None existed. Maya checked county permits. Not a single application filed. She called me that night, voice tight with adrenaline. Tank, she wasn't just power tripping. She was laundering money through the HOA. I sat in silence for a second, then smiled without humor. "Congratulations, sis. You just uncovered organized crime in cul-de-sac form." We passed the documents to Captain Chen, who looped in the Financial Crimes Division. Overnight, a federal task force began auditing every transaction tied to Bethany and Carl. The paper trail led straight into City Hall, permits rubber-stamped by Carl's political allies. By morning, subpoenas were flying like confetti. Bethany's Lexus wasn't parked at her usual spot outside the real estate office. It was sitting in front of her lawyer's building downtown. Reporters waited by the sidewalk. One called out, "Mrs. Wright, do you have a comment about the federal investigation?" She kept walking, head down, pearls rattling against her collarbone. Inside Willowbrook, the silence felt different. It wasn't fear anymore, it was anticipation. The same neighbors she'd bullied now swapped information openly. Veterans compared letters. Teachers compared fines. Every story matched the same pattern. Intimidation, fake citations, coerced payments. The city police finally admitted they'd been pressured by Carl not to escalate HOA issues. That recording alone guaranteed civil rights conspiracy charges. The feds didn't need confessions. They had evidence stacked high enough to build a new subdivision. When I flew home 2 weeks later, jet-lagged but wired, the first thing I noticed was the change in the air. People waved again. Flags fluttered. Even the lawns looked less rigid. Maya met me at the airport holding a folder labeled Phase 2, Justice. Back at Grandma's house, we spread everything across the kitchen table, the same table where she once taught us how to balance a checkbook. "They thought they could scare us quiet," Maya said. "Instead, they gave us a case," I nodded. "Now we make it official." Captain Chen arrived that afternoon with 2 federal prosecutors. They reviewed Maya's spreadsheets, the Jeep footage, the financial ledgers. One prosecutor leaned back, whistling. "I've prosecuted cartel laundromats with less documentation." Chen looked at me. "You ready to bring this home?" I was. Bethany and Carl had spent years using fear as their weapon. Now fear belonged to them. Arrest warrants were drafted. A federal grand jury convened. Every neighbor who'd ever been fined for nonsense received a subpoena as a witness. The next evening, I stood in Grandma's yard watching the sunset bleed across the roofs. For the first time since her death, the house felt peaceful again. Maya stepped beside me, coffee in hand. "Hard to believe it started with an email," she said. "Yeah," I answered. "And a pair of bolt cutters. Tomorrow the arrests would begin. But tonight, the neighborhood finally slept without looking over its shoulder. The bullies had written their own downfall, and the ink was federal. Grandma's living room turned into a war room overnight. The same room where she once crocheted and watched telenovelas now buzzed with laptops. Printers, coffee cups, and federal agents. Maps covered the walls. Evidence files were stacked in neat towers that smelled like toner and victory. Captain Chen stood at the center like a general, pointing at photos and timestamps. "This isn't just HOA misconduct," she said, her voice flat but sharp. "It's embezzlement, fraud, obstruction, and civil rights conspiracy." Maya sat at the table surrounded by neighbors. She looked nothing like the timid teacher who'd once cried over fines and threats. Her hair was pulled back, eyes steady, posture straight. She'd become something else, a leader forged by pressure. "We'll hold a recall meeting," she said, tapping her pen against the agenda she'd drafted. "We can't just wait for the courts. The community needs to take its power back." That night, word spread like wildfire. Flyers appeared on doors, emails zipped through inboxes. Veterans knocked on doors explaining the recall petition. Within 48 hours, 67% of homeowners signed. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Friday. Bethany tried to cancel it. She sent out a blast email claiming it was unauthorized and invalid. Too late. The residents had learned that democracy beats dictatorship when people show up. Friday evening, the Willowbrook Community Center overflowed. Folding chairs scraped the floor as neighbors packed the room shoulder to shoulder. News vans lined the parking lot outside. The air buzzed with murmurs, camera clicks, and the metallic scent of nerves. Bethany walked in wearing her favorite white blazer and pearls, chin high, the mask of control cracking at the edges. Carl followed, face gray, clutching a briefcase like a lifeline. For the first time, there were no polite smiles waiting for her. Just cold stares. Maya opened the meeting calmly. "According to Section 7 of our bylaws, we have the right to vote on immediate removal of the HOA board for misconduct." Her voice was clear, teacher strong. "Those in favor?" Hands rose, dozens, then hundreds. The sound of papers rustling was deafening. Bethany's smile faltered. "This is a setup!" she snapped. Tom Henderson, the Vietnam vet, stood up in the front row. "No, ma'am. This is justice." The motion passed unanimously. Bethany Kensington Wright was officially removed as HOA president. The moment she lost her title, her last shield disappeared. Federal agents waiting in the hall stepped forward. Marshal Torres approached with that calm, unflinching authority only experience gives. "Mrs. Wright, Mr. Wright, please come with us." Bethany's voice cracked. "You can't arrest me in front of my community." Torres' expression didn't change. "Ma'am, you should have thought of that before you stole from it." The cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Carl tried to slip toward the back door, but two agents blocked his path. The clatter of handcuffs filled the hall, sharp and final. Maya exhaled shakily, her hands gripping the podium. I stood beside her, watching the woman who'd terrorized this neighborhood finally understand what accountability meant. But the real justice came later, in the courthouse. Federal prosecutors presented months of documentation, bank transfers from HOA accounts to Carl's company, fake rule changes used to harass veterans, letters intimidating witnesses. They projected photos of Bethany cutting my lock and audio of her refusing to open the gate for marshals. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez summed it up perfectly. This wasn't about grass height or paint colors. This was a coordinated criminal enterprise exploiting American service members. When it was my turn to speak, the room went silent. I stood, hands steady despite the pulse hammering in my chest. While I was deployed protecting this country, Mrs. Wright tried to steal my property and threaten my family. She thought a homeowners association had more power than federal law. She found out the hard way that it doesn't. The judge nodded slowly. "Well said, Agent Rodriguez." The defense tried to paint Bethany as misguided and overzealous. It didn't work. The evidence was overwhelming. Her voice, caught on camera, screaming about community safety while breaking federal chains, played on loop. Outside, crowds gathered. Veterans, teachers, families waving flags. News anchors called it the HOA Karen case. Congress called it a wake-up call for community corruption. When the verdict came, the courtroom held its breath. "Bethany Kensington Wright," the judge said, "you are guilty on all counts: federal theft, obstruction, embezzlement, and violation of the Service Members Civil Relief Act." Her knees buckled. Carl's head dropped. The courtroom erupted in whispers. 8 years in federal prison, 6 for Carl. Restitution ordered, $647,000 to affected residents. As marshals led them away, Bethany turned once, eyes wide and wet. "This was supposed to be my community," she said. I looked at her without pity. "It still is. You just don't run it anymore." Outside, reporters swarmed. One asked, "Agent Rodriguez, how does it feel to bring justice to Willowbrook?" I looked into the cameras, sunlight flaring across the lenses. "Feels like doing my job," I said. "Only this time the enemy wasn't overseas, it was right here at home." That clip went viral. Not because of the words, but because of what stood behind me: Maya, Tom, Mrs. Patterson, and 100 neighbors who'd refused to stay scared. For the first time in years, Willowbrook belonged to the people who lived there. The war was over, and this time the good guys had won. 18 months later, Willowbrook sounded different. The hum of lawnmowers and barking dogs had replaced the nervous silence that used to hang in the air. The people still waved, but now it was real. Bethany and Carl were both behind bars, their once perfect house repossessed and sold at auction. The Lexus sat rusting in a police impound lot, a relic of arrogance. The HOA, reborn under new leadership, had rewritten its charter with one permanent clause: zero tolerance for harassment of service members or public servants. On weekends, Maya hosted open meetings in Grandma's yard. Coffee and folding chairs scattered beneath the old maple tree. Veterans mentored teens. Teachers helped neighbors with paperwork. The walls that fear had built were gone. In their place was something Grandma had always believed in: community. She would have loved this version of Willowbrook. The front porch, where she once scolded us for tracking mud, now displayed a bronze plaque in honor of Rosa Rodriguez, who taught this neighborhood that courage doesn't need a weapon. Maya became HOA president, not by ambition, but by trust. The first thing she did was rename the neighborhood newsletter The Right Way. Each issue ended with a quote from Grandma. As for me, I went back to my task force work, but I kept a picture of that driveway taped above my desk. It reminded me that the battles worth fighting aren't always on foreign soil. Sometimes they're fought in cul-de-sacs with paper trails instead of bullets. When I got home from deployment this last time, I parked a new Jeep, same model, same markings, in Grandma's driveway. The sun hit its metal frame just right, and for a second I could almost hear her laugh from the porch. Maya stood beside me, arms crossed, smiling. "Think anyone's going to complain about parking now?" I shook my head. "If they do, we'll handle it the right way." We both laughed. The kind of laugh that comes when justice finally breathes. The camera would fade out there if this were a movie. The flag swaying, kids riding bikes, the neighborhood alive again. But this isn't a movie, it's a reminder, because power always tests people. And when it does, somebody has to stand up, not with rage, but with reason. That's how bullies fall. So if you've ever been pushed, threatened, or silenced, remember what Grandma said. Stand up to bullies, but do it the right way.